The phrase, "they don't make them like they used to," can apply to many classic anime, but the series I think best encapsulates this in the truest sense of, yeah, this show's production and resulting release would actually be impossible today, is the 1989 Ichiro Itano directed OVA, Angel Cop. Angel Cop is stupid, very stupid, but its stupidity is unique in the world of anime. Between its messy production history, as well as the fascinating time period it released in, with its first half coming out right at the tail end of Japan's bubble economy, and its second half releasing once Japan's economic crash of the early 90s had started to stabilize, the show is a fascinating time capsule of late 80s anime production, both for better and for worse. It starts off as a silly, but somewhat intriguing cop drama, before it goes completely off the rails into a racist rant you'd expect to hear from your drunk uncle. The show is hilarious and completely out of whack in its priorities, especially in its second half. Angel Cop is by no means what I'd consider one of the all-time greats, but it's something special, and it's one of my favorite short anime to throw on when I want to have a laugh or watch some ultra-violent action scenes. But over here in the West, the series is more known for its profanity-laden 1995 dub from Manga UK, and while that dub is also hilarious, it's only a fraction of what makes Angel Cop the beautiful mess that it is. Angel Cop is what happens when an ambitious initial idea, spawned from the minds of two legacy creators in their youth, is subsequently crushed under the boot of production issues, and reshaped into a form that can only be described as, well, one of the funniest anime ever released and a personal favorite OVA of mine. Angel Cop began its life in the minds of two anime industry legends, the influential animator Ichiro Itano and seasoned screenwriter Sho Aikawa. In the mid to late 80s, Japanese television found itself with somewhat of a lack of classic detective dramas, a favorite genre of the at the time young, up-and-coming writer Sho Aikawa. Aikawa felt that contemporary, adult-oriented television during the Japanese bubble economy of the 80s lacked nuance and the guts to treat its audience with respect. To him, TV was full of quote-unquote half-assed detective shows, and because of this, he wanted to create a brand new detective drama that could recapture the likes of series such as Tokuzo Saizensen that were prominent through the 70s. Aikawa wanted to spin a tale of political corruption within the Japanese government and the meaning of justice and the police force's place in administering it, a true morally gray political thriller that touched on the fears of the everyman, and provided some proper narrative meat to chew on. Thankfully, Aikawa would soon get involved with animator Ichiro Itano, who he would collaborate with in 1988 on the OVA's Spirit Warrior and Violence Jack Evil Town, at the aptly named Studio 88, serving as a writer on both. At the time, Ichiro Itano was on his way to becoming one of the most well-recognized animators in the industry. His bombastic, exceptionally expressive battle sequences that he helped craft for legacy mecha series such as Space Runaway Ideon and a Super Dimension Fortress Macross had already grabbed him plenty of attention from key industry names. His particular manner of depicting kinetic, overwhelming dogfights featuring exceptional displays of missile animation was so distinct that it came to be defined as the Itano Circus, a technique and sequence that many animators throughout the years have paid loving tribute to. Come the late 80s, Itano had finally dipped his foot into directing projects himself, at his newly formed company, D.A.S.T Corporation, as well as the anime studio, Studio 88. He had already made waves with his ballsy directorial choices on Megazone 23 Part 2, and had already started to carve out his place as a director who wasn't afraid to break tradition. In his own words, "I just hate doing things by the numbers. If they want me for the project, then I'm assuming it's because I bring something to it that only I have. That's why I want to try doing things in a new format." 1988 in particular was a massive year for Itano in terms of directing. From the thoroughly insane Battle Royale High School to the aforementioned episode 2 of Spirit Warrior and Violence Jack Evil Town, 1988 had seen Itano already direct 3 OVAs. But for years, Itano had wanted to experiment outside of anime. And at the time, he had been workshopping the idea of a female-led sci-fi crime tokusatsu inspired by Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop, a film that had blown him away the previous year. Aikawa, learning of Itano's tokusatsu pitch, decided to get involved with the project, discussing the possible narrative of the story. Aikawa and Itano ended up coming to the same conclusion, that a ballsy, truly dark sci-fi detective story full of government conspiracy, police corruption, and musings on the meaning of justice is exactly the shot in the arm that adult television needed in Japan. Going forward, the project would go by the title Angel Cop. Aikawa would get to work on a screenplay for a 40-minute TV special that would be his idealized throwback to old-school detective dramas, with Itano providing the idea of the heroine battling a trio of powerful psychics, Lucifer, Asura, and Freya, giving the special a great excuse to take advantage of the advancements in special effects at the time, as well as providing the story with an air of fantasy. Aikawa's script would be influenced by the uneasy feeling many Japanese youths had in the late 80s, a lack of trust towards American and other foreign influence on the nation's government, the potential instability of the nation if the explosive growth in capital seen during the bubble period were to fall, and a growing sense of anti-authoritarianism permeating through much of the nation's young in the late 80s. Aikawa Aikawa also looked to the Scott Anderson book Inside the League to draw from in its depiction of rot caused within organizations from radicalized bad actors. Once Aikawa's script had come together, it took the form of a story of a young woman named Yomikawa, codename Angel, a member of Japan's newly formed Special Security Force, or SSF for short, a branch of the government dedicated to combating and halting domestic and foreign terrorism in Japan. Each member equipped with a license to kill, and no restrictions when it came to handling said terrorists. Over the course of the Tokusatsu special, Angel would discover the rotten truth of the world she knew, the government at large, and her own sense of what justice truly is in a corrupt system. To expand the reach and marketing of the upcoming Angel Cop, manga artist Taku Kitazaki was given a rough outline of the characters and world that Aikawa had drafted, being commissioned to pen a single-volume tie-in manga in the pages of the popular New Type magazine. With Aikawa's script done, Kitazaki's manga in early production, and Aitano's seal of approval given to both, D.A.S.T Corporation and the assembled team of stuntmen, camera crew, and effects artists would prep to start filming, but all of this would come to a halt when the production company funding the tokusatsu told Aitano that the work could not be anywhere under 90 minutes in length, as its reasonable 40-minute slot wouldn't justify the investment to them. Aitano and Aikawa then tried reworking the script into a feature film-length work, but this attempt would prove futile, as funding for the production ended up getting pulled anyway. Not wanting to compromise on the ambitious vision for the Toku special that he and Aikawa had planned out, Aitano managed to secure funding from another source, anime production company Soei Shinsha, who had seen great success with their funding of Studio APPP's Project A-ko, and had worked with Aitano and Aikawa that same year on the second Violence Jack OVA, Evil Town. The stipulation is that D.A.S.T would have to shift production to another medium entirely, and turn Angel Cop into a 6-episode anime OVA set to start releasing next year in 1989. With the new source of funding in place, Studio 88 and D.A.S.T would recruit 2 other future anime industry heavyweights to work on the project. Yasuomi Umetsu, renowned animator and director of Mezzoforte and Kite, would hop onto the project as its animation director, having previously worked with Aitano as a character designer on Megazone 23 Part 2. Nobuteru Yuki, best known for his distinct character designs seen in works like Escaflowne, would join Angel Cop's production as the lead character designer. He had also previously worked with Aitano by serving as the character designer on the Battle Royale High School OVA. With the new team in place, Aikawa and Aitano would rework the initial script and morph it into a rough draft of a 3-episode anime screenplay. Unfortunately, at this point, Sho Aikawa had become burnt out from all of the rewrites and constant back and forth with other production companies, believing at this point he had made too many compromises on his darker, more ambitious ideas for the story. Feeling that in the form of animation, it would be far better off as a purely Aitano production. With no hard feelings between the two industry legends, Aikawa would leave the basic draft of these first 3 episodes in Aitano's hands, leaving the director to take up the mantle as the series' writer and fill in the gaps and expand the story himself. Not being a writer, this meant that Aitano would really have to stretch his creative abilities, reworking major parts of the screenplay for the first 3 episodes, and penning the remaining episodes that would make up the 6-episode OVA by himself. To make this situation more of a mess, Soei Shinsha would scrub Aikawa's name from the credits of the OVA aside from episode 1, and while Aitano fought to have his name kept where it belonged, the significantly changed nature of the script and the production made it a losing battle. Kitazaki's manga adaptation would begin in May of 1989 and conclude that August, getting a fairly lukewarm response, but allowing the former romance mangaka to test the waters of an action story, though it would end up only sharing a handful of similarities to the OVA. Angel Cop's first episode would then finally release on VHS on September 1st, 1989, with episode 2 coming out that December, and episode 3 coming out in February of 1990. And then before episode 4 could come out, Studio 88 went under, leaving only D.A.S.T Corporation around to finish the remaining 3 episodes. 3 episodes that would remain in limbo, because during that period, the Japanese economy crashed. With no funding remaining, episodes 4 through 6 would have to be put on ice, not being completed till all 3 episodes would release the same day on May 20th of 1994. And by this point, Aitano had lost all of his passion for the project, putting almost all of his focus into the upcoming Macross Plus. This would also kill any of the hype that Angel Cop had. That was until the following year in 1995 when Manga UK would dub the series, giving it a reasonable cult following in English-speaking territories. And now with the groundwork set on how much of a mess the anime's production was, I can drop off the educational weights and talk about how funny this OVA is. Angel Cop is a riot. The Frankenstein remains of Aikawa's original script present in the first 3 episodes is quickly filled in with paper mache by Aitano saying screw it and throwing everything at the wall. And the result is a beautiful, morally questionable trash fire that I love with all of my heart. And I don't mean that in a guilty pleasure kind of way. As I've previously established on this channel, I don't believe guilty pleasures are a real thing. I legitimately adore Angel Cop, but structurally and in terms of execution, beyond the first 2 episodes, the show is a nightmare. An at times gorgeous looking, beautifully animated nightmare, but a nightmare nonetheless. With a story that literally gives up in real time after its 2nd episode, with the cracks already visible from the narration at the start of episode 1. Angel Cop is set in the early 21st century. Japan has become the most prosperous economic powerhouse in the world, and this point is already be very funny from the get-go, as it already cues you into the fact that this was written in 1989 before the bubble economy burst, and sets a tone of self-importance and jingoism that pops up throughout the entire OVA, and serves as a hard contrast to the more subtle pieces of writing from Sho Aikawa's version of the script that are still left behind. But back to the setup. In the early 90s, the Japanese government established an organization called the Special Security Force, the SSF, to defend the nation from constant terrorist attacks from groups that sought to bring down the economic juggernaut. The story begins with a radical communist terrorist group called the Red May attacking the American embassy in Japan and freeing their de facto leader, Tachihara, from custody, spurring the SSF into action, with the head of the force, Taki, and his right-hand man, Kuwata, digging into Tachihara's past to find the origins of the Red May, discovering that he was never a member of the Communist Party to begin with, and seemingly infiltrated the Red May and became their leader for his own personal gain. And the SSF's field operatives, Hacker, Peace, Raiden, and the brand new recruit, Angel, being tasked with apprehending Tachihara before he can plan any further attacks. The initial attempt to capture Tachihara goes horribly. While the group manages to stop him from attacking the Tokyo Treasury, Raiden is critically injured in the process and seemingly goes missing, leading Tachihara himself to slip through the group's fingers, only to be apprehended by Hacker later on. But this is far from the end of this story, as a mysterious group of supernatural assassins is murdering the remaining scattered members of the Red May before they can surrender and spill any information to the SSF. With the conspiracy clearly at play, Taki and Kuwata torture Tachihara until he finally reveals the truth. It turns out that this was never for his own personal gain. In fact, he's on the payroll of the Japanese conglomerate Toa Electric, being paid to infiltrate fringe left-wing movements and radicalize them into part of his terrorist cell, all in an attempt to destabilize and destroy the Japanese economy from within. He also reveals the identity of the mysterious assassins, a trio of psychics called the Hunters. The all-powerful Esper Lucifer, the telekinesis master Asura, and the pyrokinetic young girl Freya. To make things even worse, it seems that the governor of Tokyo, Maisaka, has direct ties to the Toa Electric Company, and even seems to be in command of the Hunters. With the true identity of those who have Tachihara and Maisaka on their payroll, and own Toa Electric, all being hidden within a document called the H-File. And these plot beats make up the first 3 episodes of the show. Oh yeah, there's also a side story about the reason Raiden went missing. He got captured by a scientist named Dr. Ichihara who turned him into a cyborg, literally a RoboCop. Did you know Ichiro Itano really likes RoboCop? Because Raiden doing cool cyborg combat, and the Hunters doing cool telekinetic tricks, really becomes the main focus of the second half of the series. Which is even more insane, since prior to the 5-year hiatus before episode 4, episode 3 ends on the twist of revealing what the H-File actually says. So, in the little we know about the original Sho Aikawa script, and in the Kitazaki manga, it's revealed that the H-File actually says that the American government is directly funding the Toa Electric Company, with the entire conspiracy being America's attempt to destabilize the Japanese economy and reclaim its place as the #1 economic superpower. Fairly standard trepidation about the US and their peace treaty with Japan that a lot of writers had in the 80s. The manga UK dub differs from this slightly, instead revealing that a single powerful American investor owns 75% of Toa Electric, essentially planning to buy out Hokkaido from the Japanese government and use it as a dump for nuclear waste that America produces. So you might be asking, what does the H-File actually say in the original Japanese script? Well, for the time being, let's just put a pin in that. Because if you know about the OVA, then you know the answer, and it's hilarious. But if you don't, well, I'd rather talk about the audio, characters, and visuals first. Because Angel Cop's twist villain is really something special. And I'd rather save that for the end of the video. Starting with the series' characters, Angel Cop's cast is unfortunately pretty flat. Being the titular character, you'd expect Angel to get the most screen time and development, and while she does definitely get the most screen time, her story arc is unfortunately quite flat. She starts off the series as a cold-hearted killer, who believes that true justice comes from the barrel of her gun, not caring for the innocents she might harm or the collateral caused along the way. Her definition of justice is keeping the peace and killing some terrorists. And though the first episode actually tries to question some of these morals, through some brief conversations that she has with the more down-to-earth Raiden, she becomes more of a bystander in her own show in the following episodes. And while she does change slightly after meeting Dr. Ichihara, and seeing what he's done to Raiden by turning him into a cold-hearted machine, the show doesn't do enough to invest us in what her rediscovery of justice actually is. So by the time this topic comes back up in the 5th and 6th episode, it rings fairly hollow. She ends up feeling less like the series' protagonist, and more like an audience insert. So what about Raiden? If he's the obvious Alex Murphy insert in this story, turning into a literal RoboCop, then over the course of the series episodes, he must go through a similar arc that Alex did in the movie, right? Nope. Raiden stays extremely static once he's become a machine, showing rare shades of humanity in the final episode, but still not giving him enough screen time or good character moments. to really make those rare moments of humanity hit. In fact, it feels like his rare moments of humanity in the final episode were only put there in an attempt to give half-ass answers to the questions posed in the conversation that him and Angel had in the first episode. Everything about Raiden and Angel feels very incomplete, which again makes sense knowing the circumstances behind the series script. The other members of the SSF don't fare much better, with Hacker, Peace, and Kuwata barely being characters at all. And Taki, despite playing the role of the jaded detective who thinks he's seen it all, only really serves as a walking mouthpiece for the story to deliver its plot twists to us. All of the narrative beats involving the characters and their development feels very first draft, which, again, makes sense knowing the circumstances around the series, and I don't really blame Itano for this. Again, he's not a writer, he's a director and animator. I can imagine he was really pushing himself with this, trying to fill in the gaps of the draft that Aikawa left behind. But unfortunately, this resulted in a really flat main cast, who aren't able to hold up the thematic weight of the concepts left over from Aikawa's original draft. The same can be said for a majority of the rest of the cast. Asura, Freya, Tachihara, they're all very one-note characters who don't contribute much, in the way of dialogue or advancing the story's themes. Thankfully, there is one huge saving grace in this cast, and that is Lucifer. Starting off as the calm and collected leader of the Hunters, she quickly spirals out of control and becomes a psychotic murderer. And once she hits this state, she does not back off. She is a riot to watch. Absolutely hilarious in her over-the-top murder spree, the countless instances of broken English she spits out.
Don't touch me! You good-for-nothing old man! Son of a bitch! Come on, Jeff!
And just the absolute blast that you can hear her actress, Kumiko Hironaka, having as she delivers all of her lines. And I wish the rest of the cast was having this much fun, because it would have given me way more to talk about with these characters. And while the mad scientist Dr. Ichihara and Tokyo's governor, Maisaka, are entertaining in their own rights, this is mainly the result of the dialogue Ichiro Aitano wrote for these characters, and not so much their personalities. Because the dialogue itself in Angel Cop, especially in its second half, is very funny. Weird moments like Angel's form of shooting in the first episode being described as Colorado-style shooting, which is never elaborated on, to the lines the characters say being so stiff and awkwardly written that they immediately rip away any sense of immersion. It just makes the entire series feel like an unintentional comedy. And believe me, when I get back to talking about the series' main plot twist, that assessment will make even more sense. When it comes to Angel Cop's visuals, the series ranges from absolutely drop-dead gorgeous to quite messy overall. Angel Cop's first episode is incredible looking, in every sense of the word. From Nobuteru character designs being extremely on-model and very detailed, in nearly every frame. And yes, that includes Hacker's mutant-looking muscles and Asura's ridiculously wide shoulders. To touches as simple as hair and clothes realistically rippling in the wind, every piece of shattered glass or every bullet fired has a sense of weight and detail to it. And this same level of detail continues to episode 2, when a raid on a Red May hideout is intercepted by the Hunters, with a particular shot of Freya breaking through a wall being absolutely stunning. And this water animation, oh man. Angel Cop really is a looker in its first half, with some very intense, impactful directing from Aitano in these early episodes. And the show is certainly pleasant for gorehounds such as myself, not skimping on the weight and brutality of the violence in any scene. This series is graphic, and has one moment in particular during a torture scene that's made a lot of the friends I've watched this with very uncomfortable, to a point where they've had to look away, so that's a warning for all of you too. Unfortunately, the series' second half, being worked on without Studio 88, and under much messier conditions, had to ditch many of the subtle details, exchanging the slower moments for action-packed, well-directed combat sequences. And this trade-off is honestly fine, though many aspects of the show start going off-model, and details in general take quite a bit of a hit. So despite the amazing action sequences that Aitano directs, and some really incredible shots in places, the second half is overall visually weaker than the first, but not by a wide enough margin for most regular viewers to even notice. Thankfully, the mechanical design from Masaharu Tomada and Yasuhiro Moriki is always solid. From Raiden's incredible looking exoskeleton, to all of Angel Cop's technology having a retro-future aesthetic that sees at the time contemporary 80s technology blended with futuristic sci-fi concepts, which creates an incredible, distinct, futuristic yet grimy urban look that helps sell the heavy atmosphere of this show's environments. Angel Cop really is a looker when it wants to be, and this is especially true with the recently released Discotheque remaster. The original VHS tapes and the DVD release from 2000, even the original 2018 Discotheque Blu-ray release, were not great in terms of representing the show, being displayed at an incorrect stretched out aspect ratio, and every shot being muddy and discolored. For the longest time, Angel Cop's transfer was just bad, and made the show look far worse than it actually does. Thankfully, in 2022, Discotheque managed to recover the original 35mm film reel of the series, re-releasing the show in the form of a Steelbook Blu-ray. I don't exaggerate when I say this transfer is one of the best I've ever seen for an old anime. Every speck of dirt, every scratch on the cells, and all of the film grain is crystal clear. You can even see the color leaking past line work in certain shots. It is a stunning release, and absolutely the definitive way to watch this show. The footage I've been using throughout this video is a rip directly from my own copy, so you've been able to see throughout the video just how good this transfer looks. When it comes to Angel Cop's audio department, for the most part, the voice acting in the original Japanese cast is serviceable. Aside from the aforementioned Kumiko Hironaka performance as Lucifer, nobody else in the cast stands out with a particularly amazing performance. The English dub from Manga UK is also pretty bad, but it's the funny kind of bad, which can mostly be chalked up to the scriptwriter, John Wolskell. He injected a level of profanity into the script, which wasn't present in the original Japanese version, and honestly it helps give the English script a way more aggressive tone to it, turning every character into a complete asshole.
Your attitude totally sucks. It's a shame they didn't take you instead of him. Raiden's a decent guy.
Peace, just get off my fucking case, will ya? I'm sick of taking this shit from you.
Start acting like a human being and I'll cut you some slack. Anyway, see you tomorrow, ice bitch.
And removing any ounce of subtlety and moral ambiguity to Tachihara's position in the Red May, entirely removing the subplot about him infiltrating the Communist Party at all. But I'm not gonna act like that really added anything to the original Japanese script, especially when it was one of the few Aikawa ideas left over from the cutting room floor. It also results in one of my favorite lines in the history of English localizations, period.
Shit! He's a fucking monster!
As for Angel Cop's music, it's only got about 3 or 4 tracks, and all of them are going to be drilled into your head by the end of the series from pure repetition, especially what I can only describe as the battle theme.
H ファイルの一商人立原を護送し、市原研究所へ向かうハッカーとピース。桑田の脳から特攻の作戦をすべてハックしたルシフェルは特攻抹殺のため。
This garbage ass MIDI lives in my head rent free. I think about it all the damn time and it always makes me chuckle. Composer Utolo Tashikai was definitely doing something I'd call original at least. But the real musical standout in the series is the ending theme, Itami by Crayon Shop. This song is pretty much a panic attack in musical form. It's an oddly haunting song at times, which fits the tone of the show quite well, but it also fakes you out into thinking a chorus is about to start about 5 times, and there is no chorus, it's just a constant loop of the same melody. And this is without mentioning my favorite part of the song, the dude who randomly starts screaming at the end. And even though it definitely overstays its welcome at 2 minutes and 40 seconds in length, it's one of my favorite anime EDs. And I can vividly remember being in tears laughing the first time I heard that dude screaming at the end. And now it's time for me to go back and pick up that pin I left earlier. Angel Cop's twist villain is one of the funniest things I've ever seen in an anime, and takes a show from what would have been a cool, if slightly forgettable detective story, into a genuinely iconic OVA that I've shown pretty much every friend I can. So, in the final show, what Ichiro Aitano came up with to be in the H-File is incredible. It turns out that Toa Electric is funded by Jewish investors from America, who control the United States behind the scenes, in their ploy to destabilize Japan's economy, turn Hokkaido into a waste dump for nuclear materials, and annex Japan into the 55th state of America. Bro, Aitano is a legend. Dude is an iconic animator, but he wasn't cooking shit with this script. And you know what the best part is? The best part about all of this? This is only mentioned at the end of episode 3 and in episode 6. This plot point is not important for episode 4 and 5 because they just become pure action. Episode 4 focuses on Asura and Freya turning against Lucifer because she's pretty much gone batshit insane, and just wants to kill for the sake of killing, all while Angel bumbles about in the background, with episode 5 mostly focusing on Raiden fighting the JSDF, who Mikawa sent out to take out the surviving members of the SSF, and then going toe-to-toe with an unhinged Lucifer. The 6th and final episode then has an A-side and a B-side, with the A-side having Raiden incapacitated, and an armored-up Angel and a weakened Asura, going after Lucifer to finish her off. And the B-side having what's quite possibly the single funniest plot dump I've ever seen in an OVA. The B-side focuses on Taki going to confront Maisaka directly, to take him out for betraying the people of Japan. But oops, it's a trap, it was a body double, so Taki is incapacitated, injected with a truth serum, which leads into Taki and Maisaka having a conversation that throws out a whole bunch of world building that we had no indication of. Dropping everything from America's annexation of Kuwait, to not telling us what other states America took over, to dropping the line, you remember what happened in Vietnam, right? No show, I don't remember what happened in Vietnam because I know you're damn well not talking about the Vietnam War. All while it cuts back to Lucifer, who explains that her motivation the entire time was to save America from the Jews who took it over. And Angel responds to that with, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do too, Lucifer. We're on the same page. Which was never part of Angel's character arc or motivation at all. She just says, yeah, I guess I agree with you. Because Aitano threw his hands up in the air in this point of the show and said, fuck it, I'm just gonna put in whatever. And then the constant whiplash between the conversation Maisaka and Taki are having, cutting back and forth between the battle with Lucifer, it's just so much to take in at once. And I love it. I love every second of it. This series has what I can only describe as an anti-Semitism jump scare. And I don't think I need to tell all of you that I don't agree with this in the show. This is a terrible thing for the show to say. And reinforces an old, very shitty conspiracy theory. But oh my god, when a script does something this abruptly and this out of nowhere, I can't help but find it hilarious. I'm sorry, it just is. The show also doesn't say anything about this conspiracy theory. Like, it just mentions the Jews probably did it, and then taps you on the back and says, that was crazy, right guys? Haha, alright, I'm out. Like, I can't believe this shit, but I need to emphasize, the show says nothing with this racist plot point. It just sits there in the back of your mind, and you remember to yourself sometimes, oh yeah, the show did say that the Jews caused this, huh? Much like the Manga UK dub, the Kitazaki manga, and the original Aikawa script, you could just exchange the word Jew for American, and it makes no difference in the actual story. The show doesn't even spread a real conspiracy theory beyond that. It just brings this up for no goddamn reason. Because this isn't a repeated trend in Aitano's works. This just isn't a thing he's written about in other screenplays he's done. So what racist tip was Aitano on that week? Was he on some Japanese Israelite shit that week? Like, what was going on with you, bro? There's also a SWAT group in the show called J-SWAT. And let me tell you, when I first watched the show in episode 3 when it clicked what the J in J-SWAT stood for, I started dying of laughter. I'm happy they let Aitano cook with this, but never, ever let him cook like this again. Because I have definitely seen people praise this plot point and legitimately think it's genius and very true to real life. And I think it goes without saying that that's definitely a problem. And I don't want to go much further with this because again, Aitano is a legendary animator and I'm not trying to slander him, but to quote Patrick Bateman,
no, just cool it with the anti-Semitic remarks.
This ridiculous plot twist is one of the reasons Angel Cop is remembered the way it is. And its final episode goes completely off the rails in a way that needs to be seen to be believed. I don't think my explanation did it justice. Angel Cop is ridiculous. It's got great action scenes, amazing gore, some beautiful atmospheric scenery, and a major plot twist that was just not part of or censored in every other release of the series aside from the original audio. This is one of those cases where censoring or removing a plot point was definitely the right call. Even if it only really makes the original Japanese version the one that's worth watching in my opinion. If you want a version that's slightly closer to Aikawa's original ideas, but is still fairly flat and lacking in character writing, and is missing the insane plot twist, you can go read the Kitazaki written manga. It's got some occasionally gorgeous panels and some great lighting in places, but overall it's really lacking in the personality department, and its version of Lucifer is very lackluster. Angel Cop is an anime that needs to be seen to be believed. It's one of my favorite OVAs of all time for a reason. It is a complete trash fire from top to bottom that buckled under the weight of its own ambitious initial tokusatsu pitch, lost its original writer, and was rewritten by its director in a way that made it go completely off the rails. It's a great looking show, with very little in the way of character, but an insane soundtrack and an absurd plot twist that absolutely makes it worth your time. If you want to check out Angel Cop, I highly recommend buying Discotek's Steelbook. It's an amazing re-release that comes with some decent special features, including some interviews, early trailers, and an article on the history of anti-Semitism in Japan just so Discotek can let you know that they obviously do not support what this show says, and are simply laughing along with it, as you should too. Angel Cop is unintentional comedy gold, and I legitimately love it from the bottom of my heart. There's a very understandable reason why nowadays Sho Aikawa and Ichiro Aitano don't really talk about this OVA at all. Their original vision for it got squashed, and the version that Aitano was able to squeeze out is this gorgeously animated, extremely vulgar and gory, mesmerizing mess that I highly recommend throwing on with some friends if you want a great time and some good laughs on a weeknight. Angel Cop is my favorite kind of garbage.
But if this is justice, then I'm a banana.